This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Carl Gruber. World Awakenings is a podcast dedicated to opening your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how they play an all-important role in our daily life. So join Carl on this enlightening experience as he interviews metaphysical and spiritual experts to discuss, debate, and delve deeply into the hows and whys of this worldwide awakening.
The law of attraction states that everything is energy and that like attracts like. True spirituality states that the only true reality is that of oneness, unity, and unconditional love and forgiveness. Together, these two are attached at the hip and perform a beautiful symbiotic dance together. Hi, I'm Carl Gruber, author of the brand new book, True Spirituality and the Law of Attraction, a beautiful symbiotic relationship. This is a book that will show you how to build a rock-solid personal foundation based on unchanging, eternal, universal truth that shows you how to become a consistent co-creator with the universe to create the life you love to live and live to love. Get your copy today of my new book, True Spirituality and the Law of Attraction, a beautiful symbiotic relationship, and learn how to manifest the life you truly desire to be living. Now available as an ebook or paperback on Amazon. Hey, it is time for yet another awesome episode of World Awakenings, a fast track to enlightenment. I am your host, Carl Gruber. Now in this episode, number 124, we meet Alex Berkeley. Alex has experienced over 20 years of lucid dreaming, had numerous mystical experiences, and has a personal connection to near-death experiences. Alex is a student first and a teacher second to life's big questions. He studied and graduated at Dartmouth College, where he earned a bachelor's degree in earth sciences, which led him to rediscovering the joy behind nature's existence. His first and soon-to-be published book, Why Does Reality Exist, is his attempt at teaching the product of his experiences, trying to uncover the riddle behind the world's existence. Alex describes himself as a psychonaut. I love that term. So, Alex, welcome to World Awakenings.
It's good to be here. Big fan of your show.
Oh, well, gee, I appreciate that right away. I knew I liked you. So, well, let's find out. I mean, I'm intrigued. I mean, you're a fairly young guy, and how the heck did you come to this point in your life where you decided to investigate what reality really is? So many young people are just like playing video games and stuck on their cell phones. So let us know, how did this come about?
Yeah, so it was an interesting experience. I started at it as actually much of a skeptic towards this phenomenon. I thought it was more like just kind of fake, kind of like, you go and do a yoga mat type of thing. And it's like, you feel good during it. But then as I started exploring more and more into it, I had numerous just experiences that I couldn't quite describe, synchronicities, like I saw patterns in things, some things that were too uncanny. And then I had some full-blown mystical experiences where, the whole general effect of losing sense of time and space, changing my orientation between self and the world, just kind of this new worldview really hit me very suddenly and kind of forced a change in my mindset. So from there, I was like interested, what is the nature behind reality? I previously thought it was a certain way, but then once I got a certain window into a new perspective, everything just sort of fell apart very quickly from there.
Would let's see, these mystical experiences, I mean, did this happen when you were pretty young?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the first mystical experience I had was that I consciously recognized was at age 22. And what that experience was sort of a flashback to several mystical experiences that I had as a kid when I was like 6 or 7. But I had just blocked this out because it was so ineffable at the time. I really didn't have anything tangible to relate it to. It wasn't anything that I could like compare it to or contrast it with. It was just sort of just blocked out of my mind.
So what was this mystical experience at the age of 22?
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to describe. I mean, that's the whole nature of it being ineffable. But the way I would generally describe it was that I had a loss of sense of self, loss of time, space. I felt like I was all interconnected with everything. The big revelation that I had was that, my mind was always on. Like I never felt that I fell asleep. I felt that I was just sort of transitioning from one state of consciousness to the next. Like for instance, the waking state of consciousness was just one state of consciousness that I was previously aware of. But then when I flipped into another state of consciousness, such as dreaming, it was just a continuation of the same kind of universal self that was having all of these experiences. And then I also had this sort of grokking feeling that I was my brother and that we were all part of one universal family. And that was sort of the continuation of my ancestors. It wasn't really just like I was an output from them. I was the direct continuation of their psyche. So I felt like I was sort of the universal first person that had ever existed and will ever exist. And it shook me so badly that I actually collapsed on the floor with this revelation. It was mind boggling at that time, but now it's sort of become my worldview. And part of my book was sort of trying to create structure around a process that became very destructured for me.
What was the situation when this happened? Were you in a place where you're safe when you collapsed? I mean, what do you think brought it on in that moment?
I think it was a gap year. So I was taking off time between Dartmouth and starting my career in the corporate world. And I think it was just sort of this existential feeling that was hanging on to me is, but like, what am I doing with my life? Where do I want to go? And sort of thinking about that over and over and over again kind of brought it on. I have some interesting theories towards the sort of episodes that do spike sort of spiritual experiences. I think that it could happen during times of extreme stress when you're kind of brought onto a very depressed state and you need to see a new window into something else. But I think also the reverse is true is that when you're happy and when you're kind of enjoying your life, you can get a flash of insight. You can get this kind of euphoric feeling that sort of breaks down your boundaries. But for me, which is sort of it happened very spontaneously, and it was just a revelation I never had before.
That I tend to agree that it can happen in stressful situations, but also in peaceful situations. I mean, we've heard over and over situations of people who were meditating. And we're going to talk about that in a moment, but I just want to go back one more time to the mystical experience you have. Now, you mentioned that you're at age 22 when you had this experience that it triggered your memory of when you were like 6 or 7. Now, do you explicitly remember those when you were a kid? What happened? Do you remember them now?
Well, it was sort of like a retrieval of a past memory that I just blocked out of my mind because, again, I didn't have anything tangible to point it to. But yes, the experience that I had, I remember it very particularly. One that I think it was actually closer to around 9 years old, but I remember being outside in a playground. It was actually a McDonald's playground, and I was sort of looking at the playground and just because I grew up in upstate New York and it was very cold out there. So I was taken aback by the fact that a playground could be outside. It was just, you know, you just don't see many playgrounds outside. So that was already pretty existentially weird about it. But then as the experience started getting going, I just felt so much intense feelings of wonder. Like I felt infinitely large and infinitely small at the same time. I felt that my surroundings became part of like this, as you were discussing in the beginning, Maya. It felt like it was an illusion and that I was no longer separate from the world. I was part of the world. I was sort of like an experience that reality was having. It's interesting because I think during my life, I always felt that I was sort of an intruder upon reality. I thought that I was looking into a reality out there. And this changed it into what's actually is the case in my worldview is that reality is simply having experiences that are us. It's having an Alex Berkeley experience. It's having a Carl experience. It's having, I don't know if you have a pet, but I think you alluded to a kind of a Cheshire styled cat. Um, so it's like having different experiences through a variety of different people is sort of my view on it. And it was like reality became alive at that experience. So that was what it was like when I was 9 years old.
Wow, that's awesome. I think when I was 9, I was wondering which was going to be the next baseball card I got. Very cool. That's amazing. So now we really have to discuss, because you mentioned this in your bio and everything. You call yourself a psychonaut. That is Psychonaut. So what exactly is that?
Yeah, so it's kind of a fancy word, but generally, I think, if we look at the etymology of it, what it translates into is psycho is mind, naut is traveler. So astronaut is like space traveler, psychonaut is mind traveler, which when you think about it, we're all mind travelers, because wherever we are in the world, we always exist in our mind. It's the one thing we can't remove. You can remove your glasses like this. That's very simple, but you can't remove your mind. It encapsulates everything. You're sort of forever locked in your imagination. And I think being a psychonaut means being able to travel between the different states of consciousness. That's what I was sort of alluding to earlier, where you can be in the waking state of consciousness, but then you can transition over into several other states of consciousness, which we don't have the inkling of in this sort of state. And that's where the instances of revelation comes in that you see throughout the religious writings and mystical writings, is that they're tapping into a different state of awareness where they're now able to perceive things that were previously outside their world of structuring reality. So psychonaut generally means one that likes to travel between those different mind states through whether that's meditation, holotropic breath work, through spontaneous mystical experiences, or through plant-based medicine, psychedelics, a variety of different tools to sort of get to these altered states.
Wow. So really, we're all psychonauts.
Yep. We are all traveling into the wonders of our mind. It's such a magical journey that we're all part of, that we exist and we share the same reality together. We're dreaming it up together.
And that's interesting. My friend and author James Goy Jr., who is quite the mystic, and he's got multiple books on mysticism and spirituality. I actually quoted him in my own book, True Spirituality and the Law of Attraction. I was talking to James, and he's been on the show a couple times. He mentioned that the casual person you run into, or at work or something, if you bring up the topic of spirituality or mysticism, most of them their eyes just glaze over and just wait, didn't you see what the Mets did last night? I mean, it was a great and I love sports too, but I mean, most people it's a non-subject, and because they're so engrossed in the illusion of this reality of their own world.
Yeah, no, I relate to that entirely. Like, just a few days ago, I was in sort of a trance state, and I was like getting all these revelations about existence, and then, thinking that I had to kind of share it with the world. But then I went into Publix, which is our, in Florida's, that's the grocery store here. And, people are just like busy, looking at which is the ripe banana to pick, looking at which candy to go buy. The kind of it's really such a shame, because we're so burdened with this world of the whole 9 to 5 thing and the whole kind of focusing on money, moving ahead, that we've lost sort of touch of, our true origin. We put on these clothes over time of, I need to be this certain way. I need to kind of, position myself as this kind of person. And we build illusions for ourselves when really we're all interconnected and we're all part of this great mystery together. We haven't ever left it. And when we came into this world, it was a world of extreme wonder. Why? Why is there anything? Why is there colors? Why is there sound? Why is there, this mother or this being that's with me? Why are there thoughts? Why am I here? And this kind of sense of wonder has been cloaked over time, I think, by people focusing on sort of the here and now. But it's important to kind of not throw out the baby with the bathwater, because I do believe my dad always lectures me on this. He had a near-death experience, and he always says, Alex, you talk a lot about the spiritual world, but you came here for a reason. Enjoy your time here. So that's also an important element to bear in mind.
Well, don't fret over that because, honestly, this is why this show exists. Many of my guests have had numerous channels on here, and they channel not only higher dimension beings, but they also channel galactic beings, and all of them talk about being like a fella from Sirius B is a 12th dimension ascended master, and so it's becoming more and more apparent. I mean, that's why this show exists. And as I mentioned to you before we started the show, the main question of this show is why now are the people of the world more than ever awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening? And according to these beings that have come through, my guess, the world is doing that exactly right now. It is a period of ascension and all of humanity moving through from the 3D into the 5D and higher levels. And so don't fret about that. What your mission is actually part of the key part of it. You're an integral part that you can talk to people via podcasts and your book and et cetera. And you're actually a light worker.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's interesting that you put it that way, because I've talked to people and kind of felt that maybe is this just me that's having these experiences, because it feels so intense at the time. It's like the way I kind of put it is that anybody can have these experiences in their basement. You can have a mystical experience and you encounter the true revelation of what was the meaning behind existence, why are we here, and you're so certain about it in experience. But then what happens is you get this spiritual amnesia. Those revelations go, you wake up into the ordinary state of consciousness again. And you sort of look and you're kind of hoping that this is the day where everyone sort of, comes together as one again. And you're hoping for that day. But, I've generally, not interacted as much with so many people in the spiritual community, but everyone's told me that there is a community out there and it's growing more and more by the day, that people are waking up. And that's, to me, such an uplifting thing, because at times I feel that we need this. We need this sense of interconnectedness now more than ever before.
And while the internet, of course, has many negative aspects, the positive aspect is now we are, and again, you and I mentioned this before we came on the show in our conversation, that there is an interconnectivity amongst every individual on the planet like never, ever, ever in the history of mankind ever before. And so now people like you and I and all the guests that have come on the show and any other show you go on to, you're going to establish, like I have, an amazing community of spiritual and light workers and like-minded people. I mean, I know people in Oslo and in New Zealand and Australia and England and on all over the world that of like-mindedness, and I can connect to them on the internet. Send a quick instant message.
Yep.
They're 14 hours away in Sydney, Australia, and they get it right like that. And the funny thing is now, if this had been, say, the 1500s and we were having this conversation, we'd probably be burned at the stake as witches.
It's true. It's true. It's scary. It feels like whenever you try to share the revelation with someone else or try to provide an insight into that, you're immediately kind of, you say, oh, no, this is too scary. Human civilization can't know about it. But at this point, people are now expressing it more and more and more. And we're getting sort of confirmation, which I think is so important, is that we can go have these revelations, but without the sense that other people are having them, it sort of feels that we're alone, which has actually become part of my study, is trying to understand the universality of revelations that are had during near-death experiences, of mystical experiences, and how we're all kind of streaming a sort of archetypal divine imagination. We're all part of this oneness. And, like, how is it that children are having the same type of near-death experiences as my father had with his background? How is it that people that are dying in different situations are having the same experiences across culture, across time periods as one another, to those that are having it today? it appears that we're sharing this ancient divine imagination with one another. And we're now having, through technology, the means of being able to communicate these symbols with one another more and more. You see it in sort of a lot of the religious and mystical artwork that's coming up is basically now you can receive it like that. Whereas before, when you were living in the Egyptian era, you had to travel several hundred miles to kind of get to a structure to really be able to appreciate it. And then even then, you have to see a number of these to finally be able to get the pattern that's going on over time, because a pattern is definitely playing out. Particularly, I think it's interesting. I don't know, have you looked into the UFO phenomenon much?
Well, I mean, maybe indirectly, as I mentioned, numerous of my guests they channel galactic beings who have come through. So, I've directly talked to Astar, the commander of the ship above Earth that has been watching over us and protecting mankind for a long time. So indirectly, yes. I haven't seen one, no.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because when you hear these people that are reporting about UFOs, they're generally forming a consistent pattern with one another. Like, they'll say certain things, and they'll corroborate one another's story, and there's a consistent pattern that's playing out through it, where the craft appears and then disappears, time is distorted. I'm not sure if that's coming through with some of the channelings that you received, but it's very uncanny, and this sort of thing is not one that can just be written off as a delusion, because it plays out time and time again. And I don't know, from my experiences, I've had a few channeling experiences. Generally what happens is I feel that I become someone else. Like the other trance that I was in the other day, I felt that I became sort of the universal first man that was returning an ancient universal knowledge back to humanity. It was incredible. I felt that we could all achieve that certain state of mind at different points of our life. I felt connected to the ape world, and kind of how they too must have had religious experiences back in the past, and how was it like for them at that time. So it's interesting when you mention these channelings, because it's something that I was previously very skeptical about, but it is certainly a real phenomenon that people can go through, where they now receive kind of a new vector to their ego. Their ego has now been replaced with another mind. It's totally fascinating stuff.
Yeah, believe me, I actually just about a month ago I produced a best of channeling. I've got 8-9 channels on there, and I encourage anybody to go look at that. I think it was episode number 120. They can go look. But I am really interested. I think it's time we should dive right in and find out about your new, soon-to-be published book. Why does reality exist, and what's it all about? How did you come about writing it?
Yeah, so what happened was that I had a number of synchronicities that kept occurring to me. One of them was just so uncanny. I was thinking of the number 333 over and over again. And it was just like, honestly, I'm not a big numerology guy. I wasn't before this experience, that is. I didn't even know what it was. I only knew about it because after it. But then I went into my father's room, and he had mentioned to me, he said, "Oh, Alex, the football team lost by 3 points in the last 3 games in the last 3 seasons to the same team." I said, "That can't be. That can't be." And I said, "No, the number is 5. The number is 555. So then the next day, I try to kind of, I try to push aside that synchronicity, saying these things don't happen because they don't fit in my worldview. I was thinking about the number 5, and I was watching America's Got Talent, and all of a sudden the magician sort of revealed the card, and it was the number 5, and it was everywhere in the air. It was 55555. So certain things like that happening. Also have had visions of people showing up at my front doorstep before I knew they would show up. Not many people, it's just generally we call each other in this day and age. They don't show up to the front doorstep. And I had one person out of nowhere that I was just so transfixed on showing up into my doorstep. It's like this just defies probability.
Mhm.
And when that happened, it kind of forced my hand in saying, I need to create some sort of book to try to, it was almost like a self-help project in the beginning, try to explain this phenomenon. And
Mm.
then when I got to a point of writing, I was like, this is actually pretty good. And maybe I should write this for other people as well. So I kind of broadened out from there. And yeah, it's kind of put down my thoughts about the nature of reality, why does it exist, and kind of the insight that mystical experience provides to all of that.
So it's soon to be published. When are you looking at having it out?
The full time period. Currently, it's going through my editor right now. She's on the second draft of it, but I think when it goes out, I'll provide it for very inexpensive, either free or something that just covers the cost. But the idea is to kind of sort of be part of that whole spiritual awakening movement of getting the word out, having more people receive these messages. But yeah, it's on my website, whydoesrealityexist.com. Or
Wow.
will be fall 2023.
Well, I'm looking to it. So I admire you having published some books myself. It's quite the process. And people, when they hold a book in their hand, they have no idea how much work went into it.
It's true. Like, I've been with my editor for like maybe 3 months, and I'm like, we still have a long way to go with it. And it's like everything with there's different drafts, the developmental draft, copy editing. It's an intense experience for sure.
Well, I'd like to find out more too. I mean, we've kind of touched on this too, but in your bio, you mentioned that you've experienced over 20 years of lucid dreaming. So what exactly is lucid dreaming?
Yeah, so lucid dreaming is part of the whole experience of waking up for the first time, because you're understanding sort of the nature of mind and that we're always in a mind state. But lucid dreaming itself is the art of becoming consciously aware that you're dreaming while you're dreaming. So, something strange happens, you do a reality check, you look at your hand, you see that you have 7 fingers instead of 5 fingers, and then you go off, flying or something like that, or move into interesting locales of the world. But it's interesting because you can do sort of very intense things during that time period, because this is a state of mind where you're not limited by the 5 senses. So you can rearrange your consciousness. You can split up into different forms of consciousness. You could be at 2 points simultaneously, all sorts of things that are open to you. And it's part of the whole psychonautic experience to be able to transfer from one state of consciousness to another. So that's part of lucid dreaming.
Wow, yeah, that is quite an interesting topic of lucid dreaming. Gosh, I have so many questions for you. How does your term reality? How does the term reality fit into a spiritual context? I know you said on your website, I read that you experience contact in the divine realm without a roadmap. I mean, divine realm, that's spiritual. How does it fit into the spiritual world?
Yeah, so initially, the way I originally thought about this was that growing up, I did not have much of an exposure towards the spiritual sentiment at all. And the word for reality that I always heard was universe. And with the word universe, it's actually a great word. It literally translates into one word. We're all one. In the beginning, there was the word and so forth. We're all part of this one word, oneness to it. So it's a great word, but unfortunately, growing up, I very much felt that it was referring to a world out there. Like, I always thought of it as sort of galaxy, or I forget what it is. It's planet, galaxy, solar system, and then universe. Universe actually is equivalent to reality, but I think of it as sort of the material component to it. I think of it as the space-time location, sort of being able to locate matter in time and space, whereas reality itself extends beyond space and time and includes more universal aspects to it that sort of transcend linear horizontal time.
Yeah, in the spiritual context, I don't know if I know my listeners and viewers know, but I'm a big student of A Course in Miracles, which is the modern spiritual guide on non-dualistic spirituality, which talks about the fact that we have dreamed that we separated from the Creator, where we were at one with the universe. He created us like Him, but He is the Creator, and we are the Son. For like, I'm not even getting into the gender thing. That's how they talk about it. And that we are only asleep. And we, in what we call, well, I think you use this term, consensus reality, where we're in this mode right now. We're actually asleep in separation. And then when we fall asleep, we're in a different, and we're dreaming, we're in a different mode of sleep. And that the goal is enlightenment, where we actually awake and go back home to the Creator. So, I mean, we could talk about this for
Oh yeah, I'm totally fascinated by it. It's interesting that you mentioned this whole thing about consensus reality, because I think, what is consensus reality? It feels so real to us, and like everything, because it just repeats itself over and over again through day in and day out. We see it over and over again, but it's just sort of one window into the world. Like if you look at all the other, like take dolphins, for example, they have echolocation. We don't even know what that sense feels like. We're sort of have one prism into the world, and it feels so real. But when you talk to these people that have near-death experiences or mystical experiences, the world that they enter into, that sort of, take this cosmic homecoming and they go back into Creator, it feels realer than real. It feels like a next step up. It feels like the world that you were previously in was just a dream all along. So it challenges this very notion of consensus reality, which, by the way, I should mention, the scientific method has already proven is itself an hallucination. Because when you look at things, you think like, you see me right now, and I look like a solid object, but the scientific method has shown that 99% of me, I think it's even more, I think it's 99.9%, is empty space.
Mm-hmm.
It's space between the nucleus and the protons. It's empty space. So we're always living in hallucination. It's just, what does our mind construct for itself? And right now the mind is constructing what we call consensus reality. But once we get back to source, we see the true reality behind it all, in which we're all interconnected, which we share this kind of living conscious tapestry with all of creation across space, time. We're all woven together.
Wow. This is some great stuff here. Thank you for that. I do have to ask this. I mean, I know you said you've had a personal connection with people who have experienced near-death experiences. How did that come about, and how did it affect you? I think you said your father had one.
Yes, he had a heart attack back in 2001 when I was around 9 years old or so, and it affected me profoundly. At the time when I heard it, I was just like, this is a interesting story. I don't know what to make out of it. But then several years later, around when I turned 22 and I had my own mystical experience, I was sort of became more interested in these types of topics. And I started researching my dad's experience. And what I uncovered was a universality behind it. Is that I discovered that people were talking about the same things, and that I was like, I try to look for explanations for it because I was very skeptical about it. The biggest one was, I thought, could this be culturally induced? Is this based off of what sort of an expecting mind would expect? And I was finding certain things that just could not be explained by that. The telepathic communication, the way that he describes his encounter with the beings that he met, it just over and over and over again, you could tell that he was describing an experience that he actually experienced. And a lot of people will say, it's just some sort of drug in his brain or something like that, but it doesn't matter, because his experience was his experience. It was a real experience on the world, and lots of other people are having that very same experience. So at a certain point, who are we to say that that's also not part of consensus reality? If that too can be corroborated by a variety of other people, is that also not part of the consensus reality? And even if he were the only person to have had experienced that, it could still be real. It just is something that's unpredictable and not something that can be sort of repeated through the scientific method.
I think one of the most famous NDE experiences that I know of, I'd love to have her on the show too, is Anita Moorjani, who wrote a book called Dying to Be Me. And it's on Hay House Publishing. Dr. Wayne Dyer, the late Dr. Wayne Dyer, got her to be on. He found out about her story and got her as a published author on Hay House. And she had become so fearful. Her best friend and a couple other people she knew died of cancer. And she became so fearful of cancer that she attracted cancer to herself. And she got so bad with cancer that she passed away in the hospital. And she went in, just like so many of the NDE experiences, they go into the light and then they start meeting, family members that passed away, and other angelic beings that, and given a choice, well, you can stay here or you can go back. But they have this feeling of total unity and union and oneness, and many of them say, why do I want to go back? This is home, and they see that over and over and over again. And she was even when she was in that state of NDE, she could hear doctors talking down the hallway that were like 50 feet away about her. She's not that type of thing. And then she chose to come back. But I mean, this is just an example, as like your father experienced and everything. And there is quite the commonality of NDE experiences of total union.
Yep, absolutely. And another thing is that if you notice, the experiencers, they too struggle to kind of explain their experiences. Like I was looking at a report from something, because, I had one person who I told my father's near-death experience to, and he said that, well, it could have been the light that they were shining on him. But then I was thinking, there's so many reports that they have of people that aren't even exposed to that light, and there it is, and it shows up again and again and again in different contexts. And I was reading on, a while back, the very first medically published near-death experience was a French gentleman, I think of around 1775. And, obviously there was no, lighting that they had at the time, but he had a heart attack, and he explained that in that light, he felt that never, quote, never in his life had he a more finer moment. What he's trying to get out is that he has this ineffable experience where he's not able to articulate the sense of how did that light feel. Time and time again, near-death experiencers will say things like, I don't know how to explain it. You just sort of need to be there. There's these qualities to it that are truly transcendent, and they go beyond. You had mentioned it as sort of the fifth dimensional realm. I call it the divine realm. There are lots of different ways you can describe it, but it's not this worldly. It's an otherworldly aspect of creation. And I think a lot of people, myself included, go into this thinking that, this is just going to be fun. I'm just going to dabble in spirituality. I'm going to get on a yoga mat, do some things like that, when this stuff is actually real. And you're going to have to be prepared for extreme cognitive dissonance, because merging back with the creator, merging back with source requires death. It requires you to dissolve your ego into this experience. And if you're latching onto your ego, that can cause a lot of fear. You can just say, oh no, I want to hold on to my identity. I don't want to dissolve back into the all.
Mm-hmm.
I want to sort of cling on into that realm again. So there's sort of this dichotomy going on between the otherworldly realm that's ancient and eternal and extends beyond space and time, and this worldly realm that only exists within space and time.
There's a classic line from A Course in Miracles that says, I am not a body, I am free, for I am still as God created me. It's exactly what we're talking about.
It is mind-boggling to me, but these revelations show up again and again and again. The way I think about my body from a lucid dreaming experience is that, we feel like we inhabit a body, like this meat body, when really this is an avatar. This is a mental construction of our mind. When we start dreaming, the avatar just disappears. It goes like that. It's a construction that our mind creates for ourselves. And it doesn't mean that there's not a connection with the material world. I do believe there's a material connection, but it just means that there is a oneness behind the psychical domain, the realm of consciousness, and the realm of matter. Those two things are not dualistic in my worldview. They're part of a oneness. They're part of a one shared reality. I think ultimately there are a lot of different theories on the mind-body problem. I think, material and consciousness are just aspects of one overall comprehensive reality, and they're all interconnected.
Wow. So, I do have a question for you, and you may have already answered this in many different ways, but I know that you had had this posted on I believe your website or another bio I saw. Your question, one of the questions is, what happens to us when we die? What would you say is, what do you believe?
Yeah, it's a profound question, so I don't want to say that I know for sure. My feeling of it was previously, I like to contrast it behind what I thought previously. Previously, I thought it was just kind of blackness at the end. I definitely don't think it's blackness, because I think if you're not there, your consciousness is not there, you're not experiencing anything. It's like trying to see in the back of your head. You're not experiencing anything at all. However, what I do believe in is I believe that we're going back to where we came from. That's generally, at least of right now, it's subject to evolution over time, but I believe if we came from nothingness, we're going back to that no thingness, no material, no thingness. And we're returning there. And so I think we're going to return again to here, where I sort of believe in the cycle of what I call eternal reincarnation, is that we're always being infinitely reincarnated on Earth, but at times when we die, our ego dissolves, and it's sort of like, the common analogy is that we're sort of this water droplet on a leaf, and it's going closer and closer to the edge, and when it falls, it hits the ocean, and we're all one again. Mm-hmm. That's generally sort of my worldview as of this moment, but again, it's subject to change. A lot of different theories on it.
Wow. Yeah. My mind is just spinning. I have so much to think about.
It's fascinating. I spent so many years of my life just thinking about these topics, and I feel that it's interesting because a lot of people, they obsess about kind of the material world and just sort of moving ahead. But when you think about it, the real miracle is being alive right now. It's sort of right here, right now in this moment. There's a conscious viewer, you who are watching this experience, that's alive at this moment. I mean, what a gift to actually be conscious and be aware. Like, a lot of people are looking for something more, but the real gift, in my view, the proof that God exists, or that reality exists, that we're all interconnected, is this right here. The fact that we're even conscious at all, the fact that there's a living, breathing mind that's connected with reality, and therefore reality itself is conscious through us, and we're part of the cycle together. It's totally fascinating. I can talk about it for hours on end. But yeah, at a certain point, I'm also told that I need to cool it a little bit, because I can take it to an extreme end for sure.
Nah, just keep at it. You're wise beyond your years, man. I love it. This is great. I do want to ask this, and this may play a part in your own personal awakening. You mentioned that your degree from Dartmouth College in Earth Sciences played a role in your own personal awakening. How's that?
I don't want to overstate it. It wasn't like it was, I know the crucial element was simply having those mystical experiences. But I'd say my time at Dartmouth, like, it did transform my experience in the sense that I was part of Earth Sciences. So originally started out as a business major, and I was like, rah, 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 money and all those types of things. But then when I got into Dartmouth, for a variety of different reasons, I wound up with the Earth Science major, and we went out west. We went to beautiful places such as Colorado, Montana, Wyoming, and I was able to see all this long pasture of land that was just empty and free. And it felt so different than what I was used to. It felt like a return to nature. and that this was, I didn't need to strive for anything more. I already kind of arrived. I was already part of the home, and I didn't have to achieve anything more. So it was sort of like it transformed my mindset into thinking that I was sort of like nature was out there, as opposed to the feeling that I was part of nature. I wasn't apart from nature. I was part of nature. And I was part of the cycle that was being studied. Because when you're studying earth sciences, you're kind of looking through epochs that are like, we talk in eras of like tens of millions of years, not just like 1,000 years. 1,000 years is nothing. We're 10 million is almost nothing. We look at 100 million of years at times of sections. It's just like the human story is just a blip in that, but yet we're all part of this long story that is creation, that is part of the divine universal reality.
Many spiritual teachers talk about and encourage people to get out in nature and go out there and connect with, it's a great place to connect with all that is. And I think a great example of that, it's a great place to be present in the moment, in the now. I saw a cartoon about a year ago, and it was a picture from behind, a drawing, a cartoon, obviously. A man walking down a beautiful country road with trees and birds and the sun shining, and he had a dog, and he's walking a dog. And, again, this is a behind view. And they had the little cartoon bubble over the head of each character where, what they're thinking or saying. And over the man, it had a cartoon bubble with these, the little symbols like swearing and all this stuff, lightning bolts and all this. And he's walking out in this beautiful, beautiful area. And over the head of the dog was an exact reflection picture of exactly the beauty around it. It was in the present. And that is what, if you can get back out into the beauty of nature, leave your earbuds home, leave your cell phone out, and just connect in the now to what it is. There's a good chance you could have your own form of mystical experience right there.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I have my balcony out there, and it's overlooking a great lake, and I'm able to see all, these ducklings and the mother duck come through, and you feel sort of part of this connection to nature. It's not like you're separate anymore. You're part of the ecosystem because you've always been part of the ecosystem. We have this oneness with the trees, with the iguanas, with the ducks, the ibises. I'm now thinking about Florida a little bit, but we all part of one universal. In my view, part of one universal self. We're part of like a conscious family together, almost like conscious beings of light that are all interconnected and interwoven together. And nature is very much part of that story. Our version of nature has gone in the direction of being a human, but I'm very much of that, it's an often repeated phrase, but we're not humans having a human experience having a spiritual experience on the world. We're spiritual beings having a human experience on the world.
Exactly. I love that. And, my own example of that, I guess I'm kind of like that dog with the bubble over his head, just reflecting the beauty around. I've been a runner for decades, and I run through many of the parks in my town here, and it's a beautiful day, sunshine, and I'm running along and no earbuds and just focusing on everything, my breathing, and there's beautiful bird there or some flowers, and I'll run by, and coming the other way is somebody walking in beautiful nature on a cell phone, and not even looking at anything around, and I go, wait a second, didn't you see those flowers over there? Look at that bird over there. And I don't say that, I think about it. And take the time to go out and be present in nature, and you may be amazed at what you achieve. So we've been talking to Alex Berkeley, just an amazing young man, got a new book coming out this fall, Why Does Reality Exist? Alex, how can people connect with you, and do you do individual counseling or coaching with people?
I do not, but I may be in the works for that in the future. You're giving me some ideas with that. But right now you can find me on my website, Why Does Reality Exist? If you scroll to the bottom, There's a subscription box, and I'm happy to connect with you and kind of share stories of, learn a little bit more about your spiritual journey and kind of bring this sort of world awakening together.
Yeah, that would be beautiful. So yeah, please, folks, connect with Alex. He's got a lot of beautiful insight and love to offer you. So, Alex Berkeley, thank you so much for being on World Awakenings.
Thanks. It's been fun.
This has been another episode of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with host Carl Gruber, a certified Law of Attraction life coach. We welcome you to tune in to each and every episode of World Awakenings as we open your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to the truth of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how much they play an all-important role in our moment-to-moment daily life. Much love and light to you, my friend, and thank you for tuning into World Awakenings.